Hello, this is Mary Hurdle from Made by Marney. Today we're going to talk about how to paper piece a combination block, step 2. To paper piece, I need these simple tools: a sewing machine, a cutting mat, a radial cutter, a scissors, nice sharp scissors, and I like to use a smaller cutting ruler that has a very easy to read 1/4 inch mark on it and not a whole lot of other distracting lines. If I'm making a block bigger than this, I would use my regular larger, longer ruler. But for now, this one's really nice for trimming up small segments. In step 1 of combination block, I showed you how to cut apart your pieces. This block is called Patriot, and it has 3 different segments, A, B, and C. We're going to put them together, A first, then sew that to B, then sew that to C. So we're starting out with segment A. It's all ready to go. I have my 1/4 inch seam allowance drawn on it. My finished block will look like this. This is a flag. I'm taking, actually let's just take a look at segment C, because this is how I would start. And you do the same thing for a simple paper piecing block. Look for number 1, piece 1, and the color code, which is at the top of your pattern, says that you need a red and white stripe, which is color B. I've pinned that piece to the back of shape 1. So that's how I would start. Some people glue their piece on. I like to just pin it because I don't like to monkey around with glue. I like the flat pins because when you lay your ruler on top, you can press down and there's not a bump there when you're trimming. It's handier and safer. You can see that my piece is quite a bit bigger, and when I hold it up to the light, you can really see that it's a good 1/2 inch to 1/4 inch bigger all the way around than piece 1. Now I'm going to attach piece 2, which is this blue fabric, or A. I don't pre-cut my pieces at all. I like to use bigger chunks, and I just whittle away on them and use them up until there's basically nothing left. And then I save any scraps for other little projects. In paper piecing, you have the butterfly effect. You're actually going to be flipping this piece eventually and pressing it. So when I'm done, this piece is actually going to have to be like that. So I know that if I put it up here, and once I flip it, there won't be fabric up there because of the butterfly effect. So I'm going to make sure I position this seam line, and I bend it a little bit to help me position it. So there's space at the bottom, space at the top, and when it's flipped, the whole piece will still be covered with this blue fabric. My colors are right sides together. I could pin this, but I'm not going to. I'll just take it to the machine and sew a 1/4 inch beyond that line, down here, through the line between 1 and 2, and a 1/4 inch beyond that line. And that's how long my seam will be. I'm setting my stitch length at about 15 stitches per inch. So your stitches will be tinier. Then when you go to rip your paper away, it's easier. After this is sewn, I bend this back. I trim off anything that's beyond a 1/4 inch from here, and I don't have to be real exact on these seams, so I'm just using a scissors. And then I actually bend the whole thing and press it. So let's pretend that that one was sewn. But now we're going to go to this section. This is the B section, and I'm skipping around a little bit because some of these are pre-sewn and easy to show you what I've done. I've already put piece B, which was the stripe, sewn that to piece 2, which was white, and now I'm working on piece 3, which is another white. And I laid it on, made sure with my butterfly effect there will be fabric under it. I've already sewn it from here to here, a good 1/4 inch past the beginning and end of this seam line, and my stitches are tiny. I'm going to bend this back, cut off my extra, and I'm leaving about a 1/4 inch. Throw that away. Flip it and take it to my iron and actually press that. I always press it with an iron. I don't just finger press. Some people like to just finger press. I don't. Then if it's a larger piece, I'm going to actually put a little pin in it, pinning that down. Now I'm going to cut the shape. So you can see that I've sewn it on my scrap before I cut the shape. Now when I cut it, I'm just going to cut off excess that I don't need, but I'm generous. I'm leaving way more than I need, but that's better than not having enough. This piece is now ready to be attached to piece A, which I did earlier. So here's my piece A. That's the back. You can see all the fabrics of the right sides showing on the back. This is the front of my block, showing me what my colors and my color scheme is. I've already trimmed this seam allowance to a 1/4 inch. Now I know that these two will go together like this. So I have to trim this one. So I'm just going to set that on my cutting board. And for these seams, I have to be very exact. So I'm using my ruler, lining up that 1/4 inch seam line with the black line on my pattern, press down firmly. This is why it's important to have those flat pins, and cut off anything beyond a 1/4 inch. And now these two seams are both at a 1/4 inch, and they're going to be sewn together, right sides together. This is the part that gets a little tricky, but it's really very easy. I go to the very end of this black seam line, put a straight pin through it, and match it up with the very, very end of that seam line with a little bit of poking to get it right in the right position. And those two should line up pretty well here if they're both a 1/4 inch. And I put that pin in place. And then I'm going to see how well it matches on this end. And again, I'm matching up these two, and they match up fairly well. Sometimes I have to peek inside my seam to make sure other things are lining up that need to, but in this instance, I don't have to because that's not critical in this block. And then I'm going to see how that center part lines up perfectly. If it's a short piece, I only need 2 pins, but this is a long piece, so I'm going to do 3 pins. Now I'm going to take that to my machine and start sewing a 1/4 inch beyond the line. So right on the black line. The red line is just to show you the edges of the segments, so don't use that as a sewing line. And then go a 1/4 inch beyond the end of the black line, just like you did for all these other seams. After I'm done sewing, I'm going to rip the seam allowance off of both sides, just that 1/4 inch seam allowance, so that doesn't get trapped when I press down my seams. You can see the seam allowance has no paper on it on either side, and I press that down. And just let the seam allowance go the way it wants to go. It usually has a preference. This block has all 3 segments put together already, and I give it a little press, and then I've already taken it to my cutting board and I've trimmed it down to a 6.5 by 6.5 inch block. Already did that. This block is ready to use in my quilt. I will rip the paper off the back only after I have this attached to my quilt. So if I'm adding sashing or another block, it's better to leave your paper on while you do that. Some of these edges might be placed on a bias because you're using your scraps in all different directions, which is fine. But then be careful because of that bias stretching. The paper keeps everything in place nice and squared up. After this is connected to my project, then I'll go and rip this off. Some papers that you purchase don't need to be ripped off. They simply dissolve when you wash them. This has been Made by Marney. I'm Mary Hurdle, And thanks for listening to my video today. And please like my page on Facebook and share it with your friends. Thank you.